All right, we're live.
Hi, everyone. Just going to wait about a minute or so to get started here.
We can get started.
All right, great. So, hi, everyone. I'm Helen Partlow. I'm an attorney at Waypoint Immigration, and I specialize in EB-2 NIW applications. So, just a quick roundup. The NIW is the National Interest Waiver for the employment-based second preference category. So this will lead to a green card, but it does not grant you any sort of a status. So if you are in America already or want to come to America sooner than getting the actual green card, you have to be on underlying status. So this would be an approved I-140 application, and then you have to wait for your priority date to become current in the visa bulletin. Then once it is current, then you're able to adjust your status if you're already in America or go through consular processing to come and get your green card. So for every single country around the world, there is a wait of at least probably 3 to 5 years. We'll probably know what that looks like a little bit more in October once the fiscal year kind of restarts and the visa bulletin hopefully updates and progresses, but I guess we will see what happens with that. If you are from a country like China or especially India, the wait time is significantly longer because there are very long backlogs. So just to keep that in mind, this does not grant you employment authorization, does not grant you a status. So you have to wait for that actual green card to become a green card holder, and then obviously you can work and live based upon that. So with that being said, the national interest waiver is an application to show that your work is in the national interest of the United States. So it's advancing something that America is interested in advancing. You are being impactful beyond your company. You're, because America, we want to know, how are you going to help us? Like, what's in it for us? Obviously, if you're an employee at your company, you are benefiting your employer, but America wants to know, how is your impact bigger than that? Because if we're going to allow you to bypass the labor certification process and get an NIW instead, America wants to know, well, what's in it for us, basically. How are you helping us, and why is it urgent? Why can't you just do the normal process that, is kind of expected at this point? You are here on maybe H-1B, your employer sponsors you through that and then puts you through the perm process. Why can't you just do that is pretty much what the NIW is asking. What are you doing that's so different or special or impactful? Like, how or what you are doing helping America as a whole. So, to kind of show that, we have to show how that impact is beyond just your company. So, if you are specifically something like a software engineer and you are taking a system that has already been built and you are implementing it into your client's business or something like that, that is like a closed circuit. So you are not really impacting anything other than your company and maybe your end client. But if you are doing something where you are creating new systems and you are making something new and building it in a way that's now scalable or being able to be implemented across the board and helping the industry as a whole, that is then how you are impactful beyond just your company and how that is helping America as a whole for the NIW kind of purposes. Similarly, they say teaching is not a way to be impactful beyond just your classroom. That's in the Danisar decision. That is the leading case still for the NIW application. It lays out what the 3 different prongs are and what you have to show for this application. So in that instance, if you are just a teacher and you are just teaching your class, that impact is staying small and that's staying just within your classroom. But if you are a professor and you are teaching and also researching, it's really that research aspect that shows that you are being impactful, because now you're doing publications, you're doing different projects, and you're sharing that with the world. Maybe you're presenting at conferences, your findings and things like that. So that is now showing how you are impactful beyond just the classroom, because you are also researching and you're sharing your knowledge and your new findings with the industry and the world, pretty much. So, when today's question is, how long does it take to build an NIW profile? That really, is a very personal kind of a thing. So it might take people not long at all. Maybe they are already impactful and they're still just a student. So there could be people that are recent grads that have just gotten their masters, or people that are getting their PhDs and they still haven't completed a PhD, and they can all show impact because they are doing things that are beyond just like, a single employer. So if you're doing things like conferences, publications, you have citations, maybe you have some sort of a membership where you are part of a committee or a panel and you're really involved in that organization. That's, something that's related to what your proposed endeavor or your future plan would be. Those are all things that people might do even, like I said, like while a student. So someone might be a student and eligible because they have impact to show. Meanwhile, someone else could be 10, 15 years into their career and still not have those things to show. So it's not necessarily about how much experience do you have, because again, you can have 10 years experience with a single company, but if what you are doing is closed and only impacting that company, that's not really showing that national impact. So it really does depend upon what kinds of things you are doing. So now, for instance, say that you are that person that is 5 to 10 years into your career, and you haven't really done anything other than, you've been working hard at your job and you've been successful at your job, and maybe you've gotten promoted, taken on leadership or other kind of critical duties, really developed some sort of a niche even. That could be good for an NIW, but they're going to ask, how are you impactful beyond your company? So, unless through your job you have maybe published or you have patents, maybe, that could be another thing. There are things that we can do to get evidence of the job that you have and how your job in and of itself is impactful. Maybe your job is, creating something with cybersecurity and you're kind of helping implement these things and it's, scalable and other companies are also using it. There's different ways of showing, even if it is just like your job that is being impactful. But overall, a lot of these RFEs that we are seeing that come in, the requests for evidence, they are attacking prong 1 the most. So they are saying, well, what is, they are mainly giving substantial merit. Sometimes they do question that too, but substantial merit is just pretty much saying, like, is what you are doing important? Inherently important. Like, are you helping with healthcare? Are you helping with, again, cybersecurity or AI? What are you doing? And is this something that America kind of cares about? Like, is it really important? Is it having some sort of good results sort of a thing? So substantial merit is a lot easier to prove, but it's that national importance. Does it align with different government objectives? Does it align with executive orders or different strategy plans? Does it align with different, sub-government agencies and their missions and things like that? What are you doing that makes sense to what the government is looking for? So it's that national importance and showing how you are impactful beyond your company. So the NIW is all based upon what your proposed endeavor is. So the proposed endeavor is how your future plan will impact America. So, that should be kind of looking backward as to what experience you do have, kind of looking as to what job you're at now, what are you doing at the moment, and then it also really is focused more on what your future plan is. So the proposed endeavor is very future focused, but it should align with what your past is. So everything that we show for this application has to support that. So if, for instance, you started with something with AI and cybersecurity, and now you're doing AI in healthcare, you're still doing AI. So you're showing like how maybe you're advancing AI and things like that, and maybe your impact is landing a little bit differently, but overall your proposed endeavor is basically an AI. But my point is that you're kind of taking into account maybe different pivots that you've had to do in your career in the past, but also wanting to know, where are you going in the future? What are you doing now? But for profile building, think of it from the officer's perspective. If you've been at your job for 5 to 10 years and you suddenly do 10 different kind of activities in the 3 to 6 month span, to me, that's saying, okay, well, why are you suddenly doing this? Why have you not been building your career and being impactful this whole time? I am also looking at the timeline of it, and not just what you are doing in and of itself. Because if I'm the officer and I'm looking at an application and this person has 5 years experience, but in the last 3 months, they judged 2 awards and they've been on 3 panels and they went to 2 conferences or something like that, I'm going to say like, okay, well, does this show that this person can continue doing this? Are they likely to continue doing, why are they just doing it now? How have they been impactful through a record of success? That's something that they look for, a record of past success to show your future likelihood of continued progression and things like that. So, it also depends on the prestige and the quality of what you've done. So if you have for the past year only done a couple of things, but they're really like impressive and they have like a really strict criteria that you had to meet, that's widely known amongst your peers and other individuals in your field that, of course, everyone knows about that conference, or of course, everybody knows about, this hackathon or whatever it is. The things that are more quality also, I think, are better than a bunch of low quality items. But sometimes I also understand that sometimes you have to do those low quality items in order to help get those higher quality items. So it's kind of like a stepping stone sort of a thing. So you can use something that will maybe lead to something with a higher impact in the future. So, it also depends on what your field is. So the NIW, a lot of people say, oh, well, I don't have any publications, so therefore I don't qualify. Well, you don't have to have publications. I mean, it's the more traditional profile of the researcher with the citations and the publications and things, because that is like a clear way of showing how you are being impactful. And it's just a paper trail. Everything is about a paper trail. And like proof of that impact, proof of how you are going to continue doing those things. So if that is a profile that you have, that is more of a traditional pathway to do those publications, to show those citations, because it's just clear to see for the officer's perspective how you've been impactful and how you're going to continue to be. If you are in industry and you do have publications, but not as many, that also does show something, because a lot of people in industry don't have publications. So that helps you actually stand out a bit, even if they are a little bit maybe lower quality, or, maybe not as many, or things like that. Things that kind of show that you're different and how you're imparting your knowledge. It could be things like being a judge of a panel on something for an award or a hackathon. Maybe you're doing peer review and looking at other papers or something else, like for, a competition. Maybe you are a member of an organization and you join a committee or a panel and you get involved. Maybe you have some sort of speaking engagement. At a conference is always what is kind of typical, but it doesn't have to necessarily be at a conference. It could be in, some other kind of smaller forum. So when I'm looking at someone's resume, I'm looking for two things. I'm looking to see what kind of information and knowledge has that person taken in. So, that means what degree do they have? Do they have any certificates that show that they have additional specialized knowledge? Have they attended any conference? What kind of knowledge have they taken in to show that they're up to date with trends? Especially if you're in tech and AI, I feel like if your degree is more than a couple years ago, it's outdated, as far as like what's the latest going on. Just kind of showing that you're staying up to date with trends by doing the certifications, going to conferences, kind of gaining that knowledge, and upping your own knowledge is one thing I'm looking for. And then the second thing I'm looking for is, how are you imparting your specialized knowledge and experience to others in the field? That's really the overall catch-all that I'm looking for, that impact. How are you imparting your specialized knowledge to other specialists? So like you could maybe show, a podcast or a YouTube video, but I want to then know who's the audience. Is it just going to be like a general audience, or is it going to be only people in your field that are really interested? Who is obtaining this knowledge that you're putting out? So again, that could be, through a variety of things. So it could be through the speaking engagements, conferences, publications, judge role, a panel, a committee, a board of directors or something like that. How are you sharing your knowledge? Because that is what's creating that ripple effect that they're looking for in this NIW application. They want to know, how are you sharing your specialized knowledge with others? Because then that creates, the snowball effect. How you are maybe sharing a tip or a tidbit or whatever it is with someone else. And now they're going to say, oh, I didn't think of that before. Maybe they're going to then change their work and they're going to implement something based upon some knowledge that you imparted to them. So they're really looking to see, how are you going to help kind of spur things forward? How are you helping to impart your knowledge, maybe even mentoring. I didn't mention that before, but mentoring could be another way, with young professionals, but it should be something that is not just part of your job duties. So any of these, if they're part of your normal job duties, it kind of loses a little bit of that impact beyond the company sort of a thing. But, if you can still show impact beyond the company, even if it is part of your job duties, that's really the ultimate question, is how are you being impactful beyond your company? So that's really something that I think a lot of people need to kind of think about. How are you already being impactful, and what kind of things can you get involved in? And, this should have some sort of sustained record of progress. Like I said before, if you have a timeline where you've done none of these items for 5 years and then suddenly do a bunch in like a 3-month time span, if I'm the officer, you have to ask yourself, am I creating like a red flag for this officer? They want to know, are you going to still do this in the future? Because if we're going to let you bypass the labor certification and give you this, type of application. They want to know, are you going to do this in the future? What's your future plan? What's your short-term goals, your long-term goals? What kind of methods will you do? How will you implement these things? How will you continue to be impactful beyond your company? So by showing that you have a past record of this, you're then likely to then have a more likelihood of doing it in the future. So that's a little bit about like profile building and the kind of evidence that they're looking for. Definitely it's all about what kind of documents you have to prove. You can't just have a reference letter and say, oh yeah, this person's done all of these things. But you need to have actual objective evidence to back up your reference letters, to back up the claims in the petition letter. So definitely need a paper trail. And before I open it up to questions, I'm just going to say if you go to waypointimmigration.org, at the top you'll see a header that says appointments, and then underneath that you'll see a bunch of different categories. We of course do EB-1As as well, but if you click EB-2 NIW, you can see a calendar pops up if anyone did want to have a consultation with me. I do have some availability this week and of course next week. Once you click around and kind of pick a different day and time, you'll see on the right hand side it has service details, and then you'll see a name on there. You'll either see me, Helen Partlow, or you'll see Alexandra Law, who just became a partner at the firm yesterday. So you can meet with either one of us to kind of get more individual feedback and kind of like discuss any sort of specific questions. But if people have more general questions about the process or anything involving like NIWs, please feel free to put that into the chat. And if anyone has any specific questions, we would be happy to answer on a consultation.
Screening questions. Hello, for EB1, what would be considered a high salary, over 160K or 200K for a semiconductor electronics engineer in the Bay Area based upon your past experience or interactions?
So for high salary criteria for EB-1A, you have to show that your base salary is in the 90th percentile or the top 10% of salaries, either geographically to your location or across America. And this should be compared to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That is the document that is pretty much by the government as to what is the number one thing that they're going to look for to compare all of those numbers with. So you would have to do the math and try to look it up on the BLS website for whatever your job description is, whatever, is closest to the whatever SOC code you're going to claim for your application, and do the math and figure that part out.
NIW I-140 has been pending since 9 months. So do you suggest filing premium processing at this time, or can that increase the chances of an RFE?
9 months is not that long per se for an NIW. I would say that these definitely can go past the 1 year mark, even up to like a two-year mark. So 9 months seems to be very much on par with what I would expect for regular processing. We say anywhere from like 8 to 12 months maybe now. I know things are kind of always getting a little bit more and more delayed as time goes on. But you can obviously upgrade to premium if you did want to, like if you suddenly had a reason that you had to have an approval sooner. Premium processing overall doesn't really have too much of a impact on an RFE rate, maybe slightly, but there could be other factors that it might make sense for you to do premium. So you can if you wanted to at this point, but I think that you've already waited the 9 months. So unless you have a specific personal circumstance, it might just make sense to wait a little bit longer.
How are trends these days for software people?
So for software engineers, in January came out a specific USCIS policy update, and that's kind of what I alluded to when I started talking about software engineers earlier. They specifically said that if you are a software engineer and you are taking an existing system and just implementing it to your end client, that is not really impactful for the national interest waiver. But if you are doing things that are innovative and you are doing things that are scalable, you are doing things that are being implemented and have a much more broader impact beyond just your company and your employer or your client, that is more on par with the NIW, but you need to have evidence to prove that. So, you very well might have a good case, but again, it all boils down to what evidence do you have of that impact that you are doing.
What do you do in the meantime while you wait for your green card?
Well, it depends on a lot of different things. If you're in America, what current status do you have? You have to stay on a status throughout until you get your green card, which I said right now is we're saying like 3 to 5 years. If you're not in America, then you wait outside of America until you get your green card, or you could come in on, any of the other like H-1B or something like that.
Applied for NIW like 2 weeks ago, received a notice. However, I don't see the case appearing in my online USCIS portal, although I see other old cases there. Why not this new one, though?
The portal is very finicky, I find. Like, I find that it's not always accurate. As long as you get that 797 receipt notice, that's what I would go by. Otherwise, I'm sure they probably have some sort of hotline or something that you can call for the portal, but from my experience, it is not very technically sound.
Will they scrutinize my approved I-40 during I-485? Am I doing software on automotive when my approval I-40 was based on healthcare software?
So yes, whatever your proposed endeavor is that you're claiming on your NIW application should be what you are still doing when you are getting your green card. Through that, they may ask questions during the interview why you are no longer doing your proposed endeavor. So that might be a problem. If you are still doing the overall tech, you'd have to see how you actually laid out the proposed endeavor. If you said it was specifically just advancing the tech aspect and, how that might be able to be viewed in multiple different industries, or if you did actually pigeonhole yourself to automotive and now you are doing healthcare, that could potentially come up during an interview process.
Are the business plan should be based on time frame?
So I'm not sure what that means, but if you are doing a business plan as part of your NIW, they're going to want to know a lot of additional things. They're going to want to see, do you have a business plan? Do you have financial backing? What steps have you taken towards this? Do you have potential customers? Do you have any proof of concept, any business partners? Things like that. So I know if you're already here and you're on a status, there's only certain things that you're probably able to legally do and still remain compliant in the status that you're in. But, kind of creating these things to organize it and kind of get it set up and have plans for the future is what they're looking for in the NIW. If you are doing a business plan as part of it. And they want to know also, is your business in and of itself the work that it's doing in the national importance? So they want to know not only, they can see that, of course, you might have an economic impact because you're going to be opening up a business and it might be local to whatever geographical area you're in. You'll be, creating jobs and things like that. But they want to know, is the work itself in the national interest? So if you're opening up like a pool company, that's not really in the national interest as far as like the work itself. But if you're opening up like a consultation company for AI or, something like that, then you can show how the work the company itself is doing is in the national interest. So when you're saying, do I have to show a timeline? you know, I'm assuming you're talking about having some of these concrete steps already done. You know, they definitely do want to know pretty much all of the things I just said in the application to show that you are ready. If you want to open up a business and it's more of a long-term plan, like 10 plus years down the line, then you don't have to show these things. You would just say, you know, people usually say things like, you know, they want to gain additional experience first. They want to, you know, network. They want to get ready for a business in the future, but they're not ready yet. So as far as the timeline goes, maybe that's what you're referring to.
So there are quite a few questions, so we can just take two more. Would top-mate mentoring sessions with international students and early career professionals, non-U.S. citizens, count towards NIW, or should I only mentor U.S. citizens and green card holders to make it count towards as NIW?
So for NIW, they're looking more for not like where the person is from per se, but you know, that's I guess a little bit of a trickier question because they want to know what's your impact to America. So if you're mentoring people in America, that's a little bit easier to show, but they also just want to know what's your impact beyond your employer. So you know, if you're in America, it might make sense to mentor people that are here. If you're not in America and you then can mentor people here, you know, I'm not really sure what that would kind of look like for your particular you know, details and things like that. But if you are able to mentor overall, I think that that's beneficial. And any ties that you can create to America specifically, so the officer can see how that translates to impact here, I think is also good.
All right, last question. How much is the worth of online certifications that we can add as a supporting evidence, which is free of cost, like Coursera?
So, you know, when you're showing that you've done certifications, you are showing that you are, you know, updating your own knowledge. Is not necessarily showing any impact or anything like that, but you're showing that you are well positioned because you're staying on top of different trends and different things and kind of, you know, making yourself stand out more to be more unique versus someone else in your field. So by getting more certifications, I mean, the things that are kind of more prestigious, of course, that kind of like really maybe matter for your own profession would make sense. But any certification can kind of help go towards that, you know, that you are more unique and you have that specialized knowledge aspect of the application.
All right. So still have quite a few questions, but
all right, so
Yep.
I can try to just comment on them on the post if it's on LinkedIn, and otherwise you can feel free to DM me on LinkedIn also.
Right. Thanks, Sarah.
All right, thanks everyone.